Welcome to the Department of Life Sciences podcast for Women at Imperial Week 2026. International Women's Day 2026 centres on the theme Give to Gain, the idea that progress happens when we intentionally give respect, voice, care, knowledge, opportunities, and resources to others. In a university community, that giving doesn't only apply in lecture theatres or laboratories. It happens in offices, technical spaces, meetings, emails, and everyday interactions that keep the system running. We're bringing together voices from across the Department of Life Sciences, from administration, technical teams, research, and teaching, to reflect on what giving has meant in their working lives and what we can all gain when equity and support are shared responsibilities.
In this episode, we are joined by Smitha. Smitha, could you tell us a little bit about your role at Imperial and maybe a fun fact or even a part of your role that you find most rewarding?
Hi, so I'm a postdoctoral researcher. The full name is postdoctoral researcher in theoretical systems biology, which tells you a little bit already. I'm a theoretical and computational researcher in the life sciences department at Imperial College, and I work with the Carrasco lab. And so my job is modeling, computational modeling, and trying to answer questions through mathematical means. So my current work is studying gene expression dynamics and how we can control them in the context of both like natural systems, but more my current paper is more towards how we can essentially develop guidelines for synthetic biological systems, which then can be used by bioengineers to actually build these systems for a variety of different purposes. And so the kind of things that I do are, well, there's the research aspect of it, obviously, but the rest of my job is really, there's a lot of mentoring involved. There's a lot of research supervision involved, from undergraduates to master students, coming up with your own research projects that they can then follow up through. There's also a lot of organizing involved in general, because you want to be involved in committees, try and make better communities as well. And my PI, Ruben, is very supportive of these kind of activities as well, which has been wonderful.
Great. I think as academics, they have to be a jack of all trades and sometimes a matter of none of them. But
the full phrase, I believe, is actually jack of all trades, master of none, but that's still better than master of one.
Which I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I didn't know there was an additional clause at the end, which makes it sound much better.
Yeah, there are a lot of such phrases where we only actually know like parts of them. So I think that one's one of my favorites.
So thinking about the next part then is, what motivated you to pursue a career either as a postdoc or even in theoretical systems biology?
Well, the funny thing is I never set out to go into systems biology, actually. So my background is actually mathematics. So mathematician by trade, and I was always more interested in applied mathematics than pure maths. I have great respect for pure mathematicians. I greatly fear them as well. But I could never do it because it's a level of abstraction that makes me a bit like not uncomfortable, but I would not be confident in such high levels of abstraction. So I've always been drawn more towards the applied mathematics side of things, where you can see like there's a problem and I'd like to approach that problem. And so after doing all of my initial degrees in applied maths, I realized that I really enjoyed research through all of the research projects and the people I worked with. And then I decided to apply for PhDs. And so I was initially looking at fluid dynamics because I had gotten an interest in bioactive swimmers, which are micro swimmers, I should call them. They're microorganisms which swim. So it can be things like bacteria, sperm, algae. And so then I started applying for different like CDTs and PhD scholarships and all of that. And I wound up at Imperial again. I should mention, I did all of my education at Imperial, which is quite funny. But yeah, so I wound up doing my PhD in fluid dynamics at Imperial, and I really liked the work that I was doing because I got to look at biology through a biophysics lens, and use all of this mathematical knowledge, all of this modeling knowledge to ask interesting questions about what happens when you have suspensions of swimmers. What can you figure out about things such as like biofilm formation? What can you learn about the synchronization within these biological systems? And I really enjoyed that. And I did another postdoc in active fluids at the University of Liverpool. And as the contract drew to a close, I came across this really interesting project in systems biology, which ticked all of my interests, which was a biological system. It was using the skills that I'd already honed. Admittedly, it was you were translating it into a different context, but it was still very, very interesting. And it was such an eye-opener what you can do with all of these basic skills. And so I thought, you know what? I'll give it a shot. I will try and I'll apply for this. And the interview just went swimmingly. Because like at the interview, it's quite an interesting experience because like they were preempting my questions, I was preempting their questions, and you're just like on the same vibe from like the very first moment, which I think is super rare. But yeah, what drives my like research interest is just being able to answer all of these puzzles with these tools, which might seem quite unconventional to people who like think about science more from like an experiment, like I'm going to have a hypothesis, I'm going to build an experiment, I'm going to do duplicates of this experiment, and we're coming at this from a slightly more fundamental lens.
So when you hear the theme give to gain, what does that mean to you in the context of your work?
To me, it means community. Because I think, so my work is about science, it's about science dissemination, it's about pushing the envelope so that we understand more. And the best way that I've seen to do this is by building a strong community which really communicates and like discusses things with each other. Because I might be biased because I do like quite disciplinary work, especially. So I think that the most interesting things happen on the edge of a field and not necessarily in the center of a field. So I find it really fascinating talking to people with such different experiences scientifically and personally, because they all have very, very different opinions. And then just having even like a friendly debate, as it were, to like whittle down to what it is that we actually want to know, what our different perspectives are. And then that way to find interesting questions. And in terms of like giving, I think you need to build a strong community. And so that's part of why I am I am a rep in the postdoc committee as well, because I think it's really important to get people to engage with one another. So, for example, one of the events that we organize is called Tales from STEM, which is an inspiring scientist series, where we invite inspiring scientists that people have worked with or have heard about or are interested to hear from. And we just have a lunchtime chat with them. Early career researchers are asked to come along and ask questions and have most of the time pizza. And that is aimed more broadly at the university, not just within the department, so that we can have that interdisciplinary cross-translational discussion. So yeah, to me, giving means building a community.
And I think what you're talking about is those informal opportunities to build a community. And you've spoken a little bit about ways that how you being part of the postdoc committee has kind of helped you foster this community. And I just wondered, is there a time within your career where somebody's giving you support that has made a real difference?
I would say I've been incredibly lucky with the PIs that I have worked with. During my PhD, I was working with Eric Keaveney in the maths department here. For my previous postdoc, I was working with Rachel Barron in Liverpool, who's now at King's. Now I'm working with Ruben Perez Carrasco. And one thing that they all have in common is that they're very supportive. And so if I voiced, okay, these are my goals, this is what I want to do with my career. I want to work towards a lectureship. I want to find a permanent position. I don't want to be moving around all of the time, then they would like sit down with me, talk to me about like, okay, this is what your CV is looking like now. This is what you need to do. And they would give me the time to work on it. So things such as like, like giving you time to work on like fellowship applications and giving you feedback on that. Or like one of the things that I'm told hiring bodies look for is independence. And so the opportunities to come up with your own research projects that you can then supervise students on. And things like that have been really great. And I think the support in general has been a huge confidence booster. Like, because like after you get a bunch of rejections, and it happens a lot, it really chips away at you. But then to know that someone believes in you, that helps.
What ways do you try and give back to others?
I've mentioned the postdoc committee is one way to do it. And mentoring the PhDs in your own group is another. Helping the master students and all whatnot with any questions they have is another. I take part in the enhanced mentorship scheme, which Imperial has, which is to help students with their PhD applications. And so that has been really good as well. In previous year, the student I was mentoring did get a position as part of LIDO. I can't remember what it stands for, but she's now got a PhD in the LIDO CDT or DTP. But for me, it was all, apart from that, for me, it's always been about connecting people. So when I started my previous postdoc, I hadn't finished my Viva yet, but as soon as I finished my Viva, I saw that there was a call. So the Bioactive Fluids Special Interest Group had, during the pandemic, started doing a seminar series. And essentially to keep the community together as much as possible, because the pandemic was horrible for everyone. And they sent out an email saying, we would like to get more people on the management committee. So buoyed by having passed my Viva and being highly overconfident, I reached out. And they're like, yes, absolutely. And I realized that as soon as I joined the committee, I was the only early career researcher, the only one who didn't have a permanent job. And I asked them, because they're a really nice bunch of people, what do you think about me setting up a seminar series just for the early career researchers? So no PIs allowed. So that it's just the early career researchers. We can get to know each other from far and wide. We can practice presenting. There's no pressure of like your potential future boss seeing you and you getting like embarrassed and just climbing up, because it's completely informal. And this group was completely supportive. And we've been going strong since 2021. And so for the last 4 or 5 years, we did this on a fortnightly basis, and now we're moving towards a monthly basis. And it really did help bring together the community during the pandemic. And for me, because I was highly isolated during that part of the pandemic, because just moved into a new city, the universities are closed, you don't know anyone, you're completely isolated. I really needed that lifeline, and I figured other people did too.
Okay, great. What advice would you give to your past self?
It's okay not to know, I think, because I think I put myself under a lot of pressure. And I think a lot of people do as well, where they're like, I should know this. And then you get into that frustrated spiral. And I think something that I do try and be like very clear with students as I supervise is like, okay, it's fine if you don't know this. We can talk about it, or we can find ways to help you learn about it. And I think that's really important, because honestly, a lot of professors will also come across like they know everything, but they don't. They really don't as well. And I think we need to just realize that. Yeah, and another thing is, I think it's really important not to tie your self-worth to like how well an experiment went, or how well a code went, or whether something's going according to timeline that you set out, because setbacks will happen honestly, I feel like I chucked down the first half of my PhD. And then, you ramped up to the end. So it happens. It's okay.
I think giving ourselves just more grace. Grace in terms of understanding that things fail, but understanding that things don't always go your way, and just having resiliency, not even resiliency, but just the motivation to come back.
Yeah, I think you do need to kind of pick yourself up again. But I do feel like the word resilience just makes me angry at times, because I feel like it gets thrown around a lot. It's like, oh, you're so resilient, you have to be resilient. And it's like, well, maybe wouldn't it be better if we had a system where you didn't require that resilience, where you didn't require having to endure all of this punishment, as it were, and constantly getting punched down. I remember someone once telling me, there's nothing quite like academia for making really smart people feel worthless. And it's sad, but it is kind of true.
For me, resiliency is used a lot to praise people that don't show any emotion, whereas actually there is resiliency in showing your emotion, but being able to reflect on it well. To me, that's what resiliency is.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point about having to essentially mask your emotions, because as someone who's absolutely like very emotive and like who cries when angry or like frustrated, like it feels like a failure when you do that, when it's actually not. It's a healthy way of releasing what you're feeling.
I think that's a really kind of powerful message, that be authentic to yourself.
Oh yeah, there's this perception that you have to be perfect in order to become an academic in the first place. And I was not a perfect student by any means. But you had to be passionate, and you had to be disciplined, and you had to be willing to keep grinding on. And I think that's what makes you a better researcher than if you were a student who could like memorize things very well and then repeat them very well. It doesn't mean that you have that ability to think outside of the box, which is what you need as a scientist, at least.
Yeah. Which brings me to my last question, really, which is the powers that be, whoever they may be, whether that's at the department level, faculty, Imperial, or even sort of the broader academic community. What's something that maybe you would think we might need to consider changing or modifying with respect to this kind of give to gain theme?
Yeah, it's a hard question, because there's so many things that could be done or should be done, right? First and foremost, I think institutions need to listen to people. They need to listen to their staff. They need to listen to their students. They need to listen to all of the people on fixed term contracts. Strikes have been going on across universities for several years. And sometimes, based on what I've heard, it seems like no one is listening. And that can be very frustrating, because I don't have like a fixed term. I don't have a permanent contract, sorry. I am on a fixed term contract. So I look towards the future and I see so many people who are very unhappy with how they're being treated more broadly by institutions. I'm not saying Imperial specifically, but like broadly, the entire sector does feel like it is in crisis. And it is also in crisis if you look at all of the recent outrage in terms of the funding issues that have been coming around. So I think it's really important for the powers that be, whoever they may be, that they actually really listen to what people need. And I think the second thing I think is really necessary, and I don't know how to tackle this. If I had the answers, I'd have a lot of money, I guess. Is I think the fixed term system, the postdoc system, is broken. There is so much insecurity. You feel undervalued by institutions, not necessarily by your PIs, who really might want to keep you on, but there is no money there. You feel undervalued in that sense, and then you're forced to move around. And you might have people who are the most enthusiastic scientists, the best, the brightest, but who, due to life and just simply cannot keep up this constant mobility. And I think something needs to happen there. I think something absolutely needs to happen there. and we need to move towards a different system. What it is, I don't know. But I think that's something that needs to be discussed in the UK, worldwide, just everywhere. Because I look at my LinkedIn and I just see people posting entire theses of why they're upset with the system.
Well, that kind of brings us to the end. So I would like to thank Smitha for being part of the podcast.
It's been great. Thank you for having me.